Welcome to another Lost but Fun conversation. Today, Miguel and I will be speaking with a special guest, John. John is a firefighter whose personality and outlook attracted me to him. I honestly have no idea where this conversation is going to take us. All I know is that John's unique combination of service and aversion to hypocrisy has drawn me to him. I'd like to share how he balances his angels and his demons. Good.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so before we get started,
Send it.
I know that you've been around each other for a little while, but I don't want there to be any bad blood on this table because, as a professional, as a person who cares about people, the last thing I want you to do is fight the fire. Never mind, it didn't let. Lara, can you turn that light off? We'll just cut it out. I was making like a firefighter joke because at first I wanted to like.
I knew what you were doing.
Okay.
Off the rip, I was like, this guy's gonna try to make a joke. It's fine.
Yeah. That's not gonna make it in unless it's just like we're trying to be full on all in. John, tell me, sort of in passing, you sort of mentioned since you were a kid, you wanted to either be a cop, like in the army, or a firefighter, and then you ended up being a firefighter. What is it that like compelled you to want to be one of those things?
So when I was young, it was the path of the military or policing. My grandfather was the chief of police on our island in the Philippines. He also was a lieutenant, I believe, in the military. So obviously, a life of service. Plus, I had quite a few ancestors that served during, major conflicts and stuff. And growing up, a lot of my family, or a portion of my family, has served, and it's always brought that side to me that there's sometimes there's an obligation to do stuff that that you're willing to do that others can't, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that I can't do that I rely on others to do. So if I'm more comfortable doing that, well, then I guess there's my calling. So that's what kind of brought me to it. Strangely enough, firefighting wasn't even on my radar until I was about 18, and then I got rejected from the police co-op program,
Okay.
but the fire department co-op program still welcomed me, and they're like, "For real, come in, join us." And I'm like, "Well, this is a great opportunity. At least I can see how agencies work together." And then within a week, after meeting the guys, after running calls, having the exposure to the things that they do, was like, "Yeah, I'm in. This is what I want to do." I was already accepted into police foundations at the college level, and I was just like, how do I get out of this? So
no way.
yeah, it was good. It was a good change. It was a start over. I had to re-evaluate how I was going to pursue it, but yeah, it worked out, thankfully. It's been a blessing. So that's how I ended up there. It's been quite a few years, so it's good.
Okay, so I think when you're in that kind of environment, you're just put in front of situations that are so jarring, and you sort of, most regular people are never faced with such stark realities of life, like almost ever, right? Maybe once or twice in multiple years. How do you sort of balance those things?
I believe it's mostly in the preparation. We were kind of, you're prepared for the most part when I was going up through the years, and even when I was in college and prior to that, things like exposure to these things. I was in high school the first time I was exposed to an emergency service because I was in the co-op program. And back then you were allowed to be involved in a lot more things that you can't do now. So it kind of brought me to the point where I was like, okay, so these are the things I'm to expect. And not everything's always going to be the same, but this is a good cross section. So the preparation and understanding the things that you're going to, and also understanding that one of my first captains always told me, he's like, at the end of the day, you didn't cause their problem. You showed up with your training to hopefully help their problem or solve their problem. Maybe not always solve it, but at least make it less of a burden.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how you do it. You just repeated exposure. But the thing is that, you can't just have repeated exposure to those kind of things and not have an outlet. So That's the balance of dealing with it. So having healthy outlets and, having adequate preparation is what makes those obviously shocking moments less shocking and allow you the ability to act, I guess.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Have you, like, say, when you were through your co-op program, or like at what point did you feel ready to deal with those things, or is this something a learned skill, or were you always sort of like in check of how far you can push things
I think the scary thing is when you're comfortable, right?
when you
Mhm.
are comfortable?
Yeah, because it means you've stopped learning, you've stopped growing. And if there got to a point that I said, yeah, you know what, I'm ready, and I stopped, growth and development would stop too.
Right.
So, I kind of look at it like everything. If if I look at, obviously there's a point where you're like, you know what, I'm ready to tackle these calls, but I can't leave myself at in a narrow gap where I say these are the only calls I'm ever going to encounter, or these are the only challenges I'm ever going to face.
Mm-hmm.
I have to face those challenges, but I also have to keep it broad because things will change, things will adapt. And if you're comfortable working in this gap and the problem is larger than what you've exposed yourself to, well, then now you've short sold and now you're not, fully prepared where you could be. Right. So that's just kind of how I lean into it. Will you ever be fully prepared? No. But can you keep trying? Sure. So that's kind of how I got to the point where responsibilities are passed on to me. And it's just like, okay, I think I'm ready to undertake a little bit more, but I can't get comfortable. Comfort is somewhat dangerous. So, and that's with everything in life.
Okay, so comfort is dangerous. How much discomfort can a person take?
That depends on the person, but like there should be healthy discomfort, healthy anxiety, like putting someone in front of a camera and a microphone, right? Right?
Yeah.
But how else do you grow if you don't challenge yourself? There becomes things where they become an obsession. And I've seen that
Mhm.
happen where you get so obsessed with things that other things falter. But with experience, hopefully you can balance them. And with the right people around you, hopefully, hopefully it'll all even out.
So, what made you agree to wanting to be on camera today? I guess. What was, I guess, your um inspiration of being like, you know what, the push that made you go, I want to.
So when y'all asked me to do this, I was obviously a little reluctant
Hmm.
because talking about faith isn't my strong suit. I asked some of the brothers, talked to some of the brothers at the men's fraternity, and they're like, "Man, just pray about it." And the biggest turning point was my wife. I told her about it, and she's like, "Look," and I don't want to mess up what she says, so I'll paraphrase very horribly.
Okay.
But what she said was, "If you're not willing to speak about your faith,
Hmm.
then who do you expect to? If you can't talk about it, you know, then how much does it how much does it factor into your life?" She's like, "If you're afraid to speak about it, well, what's that mean?"
Hmm.
So if she's like, if you want an advocate and you're if you want an advocate to speak about your faith and your beliefs, why not you? I'm like, okay, fair. And she called me out. So I was scared. I was just like, "Oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do." She's like, it's your faith.
Yeah.
You were born into it. You were blessed into it. It's done wonders for your growth. So she's like, if you're not going to speak about it,
Hmm.
then who will? If you're afraid to talk about faith,
Yeah.
then why should anyone else speak on your behalf?
Where do you think though the fear comes from? Because so speaking personally, right, to kind of give you a direction, um, I think the fear for me sometimes came not from the outside world or the non-Catholic world or the non-faith believing world. It came from, um, I would say, those who I think also do believe. Maybe not, maybe judging me for maybe not having the best outlook on things, right? Like I guess I was more fearful of that judgment. Do you think, where do you think your judgment was coming from? The fear of like, yeah.
It could be many,
Mm-hmm.
many, come from many angles, but some of the reluctances, like I've been practicing my faith since I was a child, but how much do I really know about it?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a part of my reluctance. I'm like, well, you know, my aim is to just be a good person. But you have to know many sides or the
Mm-hmm.
context of the things you follow. And I was like, well, there's so many things that I don't know about the faith, but I'm just trying to learn. And that was a big thing. I was just like, man, I'm gonna just sound like a babbling, Catholic on here and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And honestly, like, people who know me outside of here will be like, dude, you know, where'd that side come from? Not that they
Yeah.
judge me in a bad way, but they'd be like, where'd that side come from? And I'd be like, you know, it's just who I am. Maybe I don't overly talk about it, but again, some of the reluctance would be like, people have a view of people who practice their faith and they have their opinions of it. And honestly, it's not that I care if people judge me or not, because I have friends of many different beliefs and we know to respect each other and care for each other and stuff like that. So it doesn't bother me. Like, I know who's going to stand by and I know who's going to be there. So, I
Yeah.
that's kind of what got me over the edge. I was just like, you know what? The people that matter will be there and they'll still
Mm-hmm.
matter. And, my faith is my faith and I should be able to speak about it. No different than anyone else can speak about their faith. No different than anyone else can preach their beliefs. And I don't preach my beliefs. I try to live my beliefs as best I can. But yeah, there was all those little bit of reluctance. I don't know everything about my faith. I don't know who's going to hear this. But then again, at the end of the day, it's me. And
Yeah.
it's just that.
I'll jump in here. So to be very specific about the reason I asked to speak with you, John, is in during the fall when I did one of my earlier talks. We haven't. I don't know if you've been coming to the men's fraternity for a while, but this year is the first year I actually like saw you, talked to you, etc., etc. Was this your first year?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting it happened that way because after my first or second talk, I was pretty much saying like I'm trying to be done with the church, but it's just not happening. And it was interesting to hear your take where because people outside the church will be like, if you say that to anyone in the church, they'll just be like, oh, how dare you, you need to, keep trying, whatever. And your response was, if you feel like you need the time away, take the time away and then reevaluate and then come back. And when you said that, I got a sense that it was coming from a place of experience, right? Um, could you, I guess, and again, like I don't like I'm the kind of person that I will evaluate multiple times before I start engaging with someone, even in like a day-to-day conversation. And there's something about you that was compelling me to like, okay, let's just go revisit this, talk to John one more time. And each time I spoke to you, especially after like I did a talk, I'd receive feedback from you that I would actually listen to. Because most people, I'll just be like, okay, just keep talking. And I don't actually like sit with what they say. But there was something in the way that you said what you said that stuck with me. Can you help me understand why that was?
I remember that talk, and I remember you saying like you were having, questions, challenges, and stuff like that. And I always knew that the door's always open. You know, door to come back to God is always going to be there. And people need space, people need time, but always understand that door's open, right? Like a lot of going to mass and learning about the faith has also taught me a lot about parenting, right? Like if if I have to, my kids need space or they're having issues and whatever, you can't cut them off. You have to leave that door open, right? No different than if I'm a sinner, which absolutely I am. There's that chance to come back. When you forget that there's a chance to come back, that's when, you kind of drift away. But if you understand that there's always that chance to come back, no matter what, you know, judgment free, we talked about judgment,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, who's judging us, right? Like if we understand that that door is always open, man, come back. come back. It's home, and the door's open, right? So when you said all that stuff, I'm like, that's cool. I have a lot of people that I've known throughout the years practice faith and move away from the faith and come back for whatever compelled them to it down the road. But the beauty of that journey is that the door was always open. No one ever judged you for coming back, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one ever made you feel bad for coming back. Just come back. There's times where over the years, I practiced and I'd go, but I didn't have the full depth of it. So was I just going because it was a part of my routine? I don't know either, but I always knew that if I kept coming back, that door would be open, and I'd see the benefits of it, right? So, like it was a very eye-opening conversation we had that first time, because I'm like, wow, man, he just presented, he just invoked a lot of things when it came to the faith. And then to tell me that you had challenges with the faith, I was like, okay, it's a conundrum. But then at the end of the day, every Saturday I'd see you come back. So, that was one of the things. It's like, just keep coming back. That door's always open. And I don't think there'd be anyone who'd say, don't come back. And that's why I kind of told you, I'm like, take your time, take your space, but when you're ready, come back. Just come back.
So I want to juxtapose that message and that experience perhaps with, I guess, something that Miguel has sort of faced where he's sort of seen the judgmental side of the church. So, Miguel, do you want to speak a little more about, like, let's just say when you were like at Life Teen or whatever, um, if you heard that from someone like who was at the church, how different would your take on people of the church be? Or is this like an anomaly and this is not reflective of the general thing that you feel like the church is, or the people in the church is? Or
So you're asking me if I think his approach to things is an anomaly to the
right, because like the norm, what we hear like by far is that people will like bite at you and nip at you and sort of like,
yeah.
it's like, oh, why'd you go away? But John's message is, as long as you come back, that's what matters. Whereas maybe like the widespread message is like, oh, don't leave, or how dare you leave. Like they focus more on the leaving or departure.
No, I don't think that's the. I don't think I've seen people have an issue with people leaving and then judging them for leaving. I don't think that's. Yeah, that's not the culture of the the Catholic Church. I think when I would point at certain things that I didn't like, it was more so when you were in the Catholic Church. People were pointing at you though because you were, I guess, not the best example, or you weren't living what they would consider a great life. So they would start picking at parts of your character and being like, that stuff. Like maybe, I don't know. I think basically it's separate. I think
It's different.
It's different.
It's a different
yeah.
sort of judgment. Because, like, I guess speak, because, like, John was weirdly not the first person who said that to me. Because even the priest I went to, Seamus,
Mhm.
right? Even he's just like, just take your time, like, dip your foot in. Where, it's almost like going up to your parents and, like, confessing, like, oh, you just broke, like, a vase or something. And you're like, oh, they're going to, like, lose their shit on me. But they're like, no, it's fine. Because you almost like brace yourself for the judgment or the scrutiny or the whatever. And at least in my position, I found that most of it was coming from the inside, where it's like, when you know this is the thing that you're supposed to be doing and you're not doing it, or you're not supposed to break that vase, but you're playing cricket in the house and like the vase got busted up,
Was that you two?
No, that was mainly me and my brother.
All right,
We
gotcha,
broke like
I
chandeliers
gotcha.
and everything, dude. Yeah, we had like family photos hanging with duct tape.
We've all done it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But, talk to your parents and what do they say? Right?
Mm-hmm.
No harm, no foul, upset.
Yeah.
disappointed a little bit, but no one cut you out, no one kicked you out, right? Like, I guess in my experience, it's kind of been like that. We all make mistakes. Just gotta come back.
So I want to dig into this message of comeback a bit deeper, because as a person who still struggles with that message, how do you overcome the internal aversion of your own flaws and failures? So you sort of meld your identity with your flaws. Therefore, it's not like come back and strip your flaws away from you. It's like, oh, the flaws are stuck and welded onto me. So I cannot come back. Or even if I do, I'd still feel out of place. How do you overcome that, I guess?
Man, look at it. Look at half the people we learn about and the flaws and the things they brought to the altar. And they were forgiven and they were able to move on and do great things, right? And that's one of the biggest things I've learned from the men's fraternity. You learn about some people's histories and some stories and stuff like that. And you're like, if that guy can go in there, turn his life around, then, you know, why am I afraid to, bring my sins out, right? And why am I afraid to to come
Mm-hmm.
come to church and stuff like that, right? Like, you know, it's a house full of sinners. We're all just trying to get better. So everyone has a different, you know,
Mm-hmm.
interpretation of how they feel they've sinned. But at the end of the day, there's only one person judging us, so really it doesn't matter. Just show up, man. Honestly, like if you think about it, you know, there's been boatloads of sinners who've done far worse, persecuted people and done all sorts of awful things. They find their faith and they come back and they become pillars of, the faith. So to think that, we don't have that opportunity is selling our faith short, I guess, right?
I agree with you. And now I'm sort of looking at it as, is self forgiveness a skill set that needs to be like learned? Or, 'cause I don't think to some degree it's not natural for some people at least, right? So it's like, how do you learn? So, and the other thing you said that stood out to me was there's only one person judging you, but I would uh, modify that to say there's only one person judging you that matters,
Yes.
because there's a lot of
Yep.
judgment,
There's a
like
lot of judgment.
self judgment. Then you want to get into demons and devils, like that sort of judgment as well, like the harmful judgment, if you will.
Yeah.
But if we can agree on there's only one person judging you that matters, how do you believe that? How do you learn to believe that?
How do I learn to believe that there's only one person judging me that matters?
Yeah.
I guess it comes from this strong, innate belief in the faith that there's one person that's blessed me with everything. So if you know, and there's been lots of things that I've prayed for over my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been blessed with. If I can believe that, then I can believe that there's only one person that's going to take those sins away from me, right? Like it's a balance. You can't have one without the other. You can't say that I've prayed and I've dedicated my life to trying to be a better person of faith and see the blessings in which come from it and not accept the fact that he'd also bless you with forgiveness or removing those doubts and those weights from you, right? So I would just weigh it like that. There has to be balance. And if God's going to bless me,
Mm-hmm.
then God can be on the other side and he can also forgive me, right? And you know the craziest thing that's just been sitting with me for the past little while is by name. God knows all individually by name,
Mm-hmm.
by purpose, by whatever. So if you think about it, man, if you can believe that you're blessed to be here, then you can believe that he can also forgive you, right? And that thing about judgment, about the other judgments of others around us and
Around,
stuff
yeah.
like that. What's that old saying? Don't take criticism from people you wouldn't take advice from.
Mm.
It's all in the weight that you put their judgment, right? Obviously, there's going to be some that you're going to have to put some weight to,
Yeah.
right? Because those people matter to you. And if those people matter to you, then you can hold those things into account when you deal with, the pressures and the judgment and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, man, you can't say you're blessed so much, not say you can't be forgiven, right? So
So
hopefully that's clear enough.
no,
No,
it's
that's
clear.
great.
It's clear. I had 2 questions. I guess you mentioned a little bit about how throughout the years of going through church, sometimes you were just like, is it routine? In your personal journey, have you ever felt alone in the church? Almost like you were surrounded by people who you couldn't like relate to, not because I'm trying to explain it. Basically, like you felt like maybe you weren't even worthy enough to be around the people that are here. Because you kind of said we're a house full of sinners, or we're a church full of sinners and people are here. But sometimes I feel like I don't get that vibe. I don't get that energy, right? There were definitely days in my past where I felt like I'm the only sinner in here right now. Like, versus have you ever had that experience or
I'm just gonna kind of rephrase, or not rephrase, but I'm kind of looking at that from a different way.
yeah.
And it's like I had this, growing up, I have friends and stuff in the past, and like, man, why's that guy looking at me? Why's that guy looking at me?
Yeah.
And it's just like, dude, look at what you're expressing, right? So to bring that back to where we're going with this is like, sometimes if I felt that way, it'd just be like, well, is that just because that's what I'm projecting? Is that what I'm feeling, that I'm the only one here? And that's why I feel like I'm alone and isolated. And I kind of look at it like that. Well, is this something within me, or is this something that I'm actually feeling? Is this tangible, or is this me in my head? Or is that just something I perceive of myself because of whatever's going on in my life at that time? But yeah, I kind of look at it like that. Like, you go there and you're like, these things are happening around you. And you ask yourself, like, am I the only one? And times when that may have come across my plate, it's like, well, is that what I'm just projecting? And is that like, these are my experiences though, right? I'm not talking about
Yeah.
your experiences, but to the question, it's like, well, is that just what I want? Is that what I'm just feeling? Is that what I'm just projecting? And I want it to come, I want acknowledgement that that's what it is, or is it real? And a lot of times it was like, man, that's just me in my head. A lot of the things are like, okay, that's me in my head. So yeah, you know what, when it comes to actual like isolation or anything in the church, I don't think I've ever felt alone in the church because I'm in God's house, right? Like, it's 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 a point of reference, I guess. And a point of reference is somewhere you always go back to be safe. So I've never felt alone in that regard, but there are times where, you feel alone in your thoughts, but I think quiet is also a good thing when you're there because it helps you dive into those thoughts and to see what the message that needs to come out is, right? So yeah, I don't think I've ever felt that way. When I have, I think it would just may have been how I projected what I was feeling and
It
I wanted to
seems,
return.
yeah, I think it seems like you take a lot of comfort in knowing that God is present when you're in church
I think that's the big thing.
and knowing that he is greater than your sins. Right?
And greater than my will.
And your will.
Right? Because how many things have you prayed for over your life that you didn't get or didn't happen? And you're like, why?
Yeah.
But then better happens, right?
But
So
how did you get to that point, I guess? Because
yeah.
I think the piece here for me is that feeling of coming into any place and not feeling good enough and feeling inadequate around your peers is because you're so in your head about like the mistakes you've made, the choices you've made. And from what I'm grasping is just you're describing that experience of when you're in church being so entrusting to God, like your life is so entrusted to God that you don't really worry about the fact that you're not meeting the bar. You know what I mean? Like it's not even a question for you. It's more, even if you are or not, God's going to help you through it. So I'm going to not be in my head about the fact that I'm not good enough and that everyone else here is better than me or something like that. It's more like, nope, whether that's the case or not, I'm just going to keep on trucking, that's kind of like, again, the perception I'm getting is that.
Well, it's like you can pray or worry, but not both, right? I think that's been hammered into me over the years by different
Interesting.
people.
You can pray
or worry, but not both.
Okay.
But you got to remember, right? With prayer requires action. You can pray so much, but if you don't act, there has to be that balance, right? Like, and I think there's something to be wholly said about trusting in God, but God also gave you the ability to act. So when it comes to, feeling like I'm the only sinner or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and like going into in church and just feeling out of place or whatever, it's like I know whose house I'm in, and you know, at this moment, this is where we abide, and this is where we're gonna be, and outside of this, it's my turn to act. So, I kind of move the things, those pressures of, feeling judged or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
just out out of that space. And I focus on the whole reason I'm there, right? Like, yeah.
Is there a personal anecdote that can mark the point where you kind of embodied that, or has it always just been ingrained in you?
I think growing up, faith has been something that's been imparted on me very strong. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, some of the big times, like the big times where where, you know, God's grace is like, blessed me was like, things like my wife, like I didn't call her my wife all the time. She was my girlfriend. But to go from girlfriend to wife was a big step. And that took a lot of thought and prayer. It took more prayer than thought, right? Because thoughts would tell you the right thing. Prayers confirmed it, I guess. You know, Starting a family. Am I ready for this? God brings you to it, He'll help you through it. But the action part needed to happen. And that's, where a lot of the things were you can't acknowledge God's blessings without acknowledging everything else too, right? So I think those were, big pivotal moments in my life, right? Like wouldn't be where I am and obviously I have a lot to improve and a lot of things I could do better, but there's so many blessings that I can't overlook. And that just came because you gotta have trust, faith, but the flip side to that, you have to take that part of action, right? Like I can pray that this is the right thing to do, but then I have to make that choice. And when I make that choice, I have to follow through with it. So yeah, I think that was the big moment where a lot of things changed. I was practicing the faith, understanding, learning it, understanding that I had a code that I was going to live by.
Mhm.
But when those moments happened and stuff like that, it's like, well, those become confirmation that the code you're living by is,
It's working.
is on the right path, I hope. Right. But also knowing that if I slip and I fall, I've had that safety net of, being able to, come back
Hmm.
and make things right. So yeah, becoming an adult, becoming a husband and father has probably been some of the biggest confirmations of understanding that faith is a very important part in our family's life. So
True.
Yeah, but I think you said you had two questions. Is there a follow up or?
Oh, I think I may have lost the second question because I was chasing this.
sorry, man.
No, it happens. Like the reason I'm asking him is because I wasn't sure where we wanted to go from here. But so far, are you feeling good, John? Like comfortable,
Yeah,
all that
man.
stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Um, there was one thing I wanted to follow up on, but I don't know if it's gonna yield like some kind of, because all I'm trying to do is get to know you a little more because I wanted the space to sort of talk to you more than for like 15 minutes at a time,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, now I gotta like turn the projector on and like,
Yeah.
get things rolling. Um, and there's just still something about you that I'm just trying to put my finger on and I'm not able to. So let me try this angle. Earlier when you were talking about the obstacles that are in your life, etc., the thought or the verse that sort of popped into my mind was, God doesn't give you more than you can deal with, right? Where it's like, yeah, you're given obstacles, but like you're also given like the merits and like the skills and the strengths and the people to help you overcome those obstacles. it sounds like you believe that based on everything you said so far. How, like, convince me that that's true, right? Because, like, when I think about it, I'll give you my take on it, where it's like, yes, if you try your hardest and like work, uh, you will get there. That's the teaching. That's the message. How do I know that it's true? Because that in itself requires faith. That requires the belief both in the person that gave you the skills, as well as faith in yourself, and like, that self trust that, like, yes, I can do it. But then what about that voice is like, but maybe you can't. And then the thing in your lap is actually too overwhelming. Like, don't even bother trying because you can't deal with it. So how do you, I guess, yeah, convince me? Because I don't want to believe that I'm unable to do this, but I want to sort of hear from someone who embodies that belief.
I kind of look at it like we're given a toolbox, right? You're given your faith, your beliefs, your strength, things, and the good things that God's blessed us with. But He's also giving you a toolbox, you know. And every time that obstacle comes up, He's giving you a different tool out of that toolbox. Sometimes it's humility to accept that you can't do this on your own. Sometimes it's courage to take that leap across the threshold. And sometimes it's, could be many other things. But what happens is it's that inner examination of what do I need and what do I have to humble myself to? What is it that what is it that God's trying to tell me that I need to learn here? What's the lesson here? And I'll learn this by accepting the tool out of that toolbox. And humility, knowing I can't do it, is sometimes how you get past that obstacle. Or, you know, courage to know that, I've prepared for this. I'm ready for this. Now I just got to step through, right? So depending on what the situation is, and you know what? Sometimes it's like anger. Man, God's giving you the capacity to love more so than the capacity to be mad. So it's like, okay, which of these tools out of this toolbox do I need to use to learn this lesson? And again, sometimes those tools are heavy and you just got to accept it, right? Like, but you have to see what the lesson is in it. And at times it's easier to be said like right now than it is at that moment. But, there's got to be a lesson behind it. There's got to be a reason behind it. And at times it's to find that reason. So again, I kind of think about it. I look at it like that. Well, what's the lesson here?
Okay, so again, you're pretty much like, okay, what if we look at this as Aesop's sour grapes, right? Where it's like, okay, in order to get this to this goal, these grapes, I have to like use the cutter and the shredder. I don't do gardening, so let's just let's just say tools
Yep.
for now, right? But then the grapes are just a little bit out of my reach. Like my fingers are getting blistered up or like cut up. And I'm just like, you know what? Those grapes are probably sour. I don't want them. Where you sort of lie to yourself that you know that the grapes are worth it, but because it's going to take so much work and so much effort, instead of like putting the work in and like overcoming the obstacle, instead of trying to use this new tool that's too heavy, you're just like, perhaps the grapes are going to be sour anyways. So why put in all this work? For someone who's down that path, like, I'm not saying, obviously we all know we should not think that way, but for someone who's either convinced or convincing himself that the grapes are sour, what would you say to that person?
It's 50-50 all the time, right? You either do or you don't. But what's the outcome of not acting versus what's the benefit of acting, right? Is your inaction, you know, if you're on that path and like, well, why am I going to do this? Well, what happens if you don't do it? Who are your shareholders? Who are your stakeholders? Who who is affected by your decisions? Is it a personal decision? Is it a familial decision? Is it whatever? But you have to look at what the outcome is. And if the choice is 50-50, most of the time, some sort of action beats inaction. Like better have tried and and totally failed than to say, well, I coulda. Like, I have a lot of people say, well, I was gonna do that. I was gonna try out for this and I was gonna do that. I'm like, did you? You know? Like tomorrow I could have been like, oh, I was gonna go talk to these two dudes on a podcast in front of cameras, but I didn't. But then we wouldn't be at this point.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be able to, be comfortable speaking about my faith. Right? You gotta see what's the outcome. Right? Like, I don't know, man. There's a reason why I walked through that door at the men's fraternity. Don't know what it is yet, but it's gonna be there. The byproduct is I've run into a lot of very good people that have helped me expand how I look at life, right? And I think it's been one of those journeys in which it's kind of enriched parts of my life, if not all of my life. So if you say, well, how do I get someone who says, well, I'm just going to bail and quit versus I'm going to try and fail? Well, if you try and you say you're going to fail, maybe there's a good chance you might fail. But if you say you're going to try, then there's always that 50% chance that you might do it right. And it might do something for you. Even if it's small, it's still growth. So yeah, when you talk about someone who's like, going to quit, just think about the power of your inaction versus, what you can learn from trying. And I guess part of that's the dad, right? Like having the dad side of me, like, just, my dad never told me. He's like, well, you could quit or you could try. Man, there's a lot of things that, I tried. I'm like, oh, that ain't bad. I'm actually learning something. I'm actually growing. It's because they encouraged me. But if I quit, what things would I have not learned? What things would I have not grown from? So,
yeah, I think my key takeaway on that one is, what do you replace the grapes with? Like, because at the end of the day, if you choose to walk away from it, something else has to take their place. Otherwise, you're left rudderless, right? In terms of you don't know what direction to actually go in. And then how many times are you willing to walk away from the grapes or the bananas or the oranges or whatever until like you do have to jump at something? And then and pretty much like I'm using this as an example of like what if the grapes are just on the tallest tree and like there's no way you're going to get up there. And then sort of like the way I'm perceiving it, you just look for the next tallest tree and like analyze again. Because perhaps the end goal is to get the grapes, but you're probably not ready to climb that tree yet.
all right, so let's
I
frame
don't
this.
even know if grapes grow on trees.
They grow on,
Grow on the vine.
on the vines.
Yeah.
So if we change the words and say if your goal is trying to go to heaven and bring your family to heaven and stuff like that, but you feel it's unattainable, is that kind of what you're getting at, the just that kind of thing?
I'm talking about smaller goals here, but yeah, let's take that as the example, right? Because that is probably like the tallest, like.
Well, that's why when you said the tallest tree,
the big boy, yeah,
when you're talking about the tallest
yeah,
tree, I was just like, well, the tallest tree would just try to be,
because all the other things are just like on your path to climbing that one.
yeah, but you got to ask yourself, is every step of that journey honorable? So if I'm climbing that tree and it's far, I'm climbing that tree and there's challenges, is climbing that tree still the honorable path? Is that what's going to help me eventually get to the top of the tree? I'd say one of the biggest things is that tree, if it's an honorable path. Man, this is from, I can't remember where I learned this from. Honor as a way of living. Live honorably, right? And at times it's a challenge because there's many things in its way. But if that's the tallest tree, how many times you got to climb a tree and do stuff or do something challenging and it's hard in the path, but the time you achieve it, it's so much better. But there's times where you're on a on a path and you don't know when it's going to end. By the time you finish it, you're like, wow, that was worth it. Well, I'm hoping that, you know, climb an honorable, follow the honorable path, and at the end it'll be worth it. So if you have a goal in mind, or if you have a goal that you believe in, then, you know, it's no different than anyone, like someone who wants to achieve something elsewhere. If they believe in it and they find it's worth it, they'll work towards it. So that's how I look past it. It's like, you know what, there's going to be challenges, but if I think the end is worth the effort, then we have to try. So I ain't gonna quit, right? Like, so yeah.
Any take on that, Miguel? Or
I guess the thing that I've been asking myself in my head when I'm listening is, have you always been this way? Like, is this really has always been your mindset, right? I guess personally speaking, I kind of adopted this belief that everyone has had their downfall or pitfall or something that, where they didn't always just have these virtues, right? That they believe in. And something made them realize there's a reason why honor, for example, is the way to go, right? Living an honorable life, or consistent, making choice, like you were saying, choosing to do actions and trusting God. Like you were saying, your wife and your kids were a part of that journey, and like putting and trusting things to God. But there was a point then when you didn't trust everything to God, right? So I guess I'm like curious about, like, you don't have to go super detailed, but like in my mind, and even if you're not comfortable, you don't have to say anything. But my mind is just like, what is that part of your story that um you that brought you to where you are now, and what did that transition look like for you? And the reason I ask, or why I'm so interested in that personally, is because going back to the piece about always sometimes sitting in church and feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough, is because, and I think part of me, I'm playing with the idea that you were talking about projecting it. I think there's definitely some truth to that. But I guess I've been also critical of the culture of the church in general, of it not being open to discussing, though, that part of our lives. Where, for example, we'll say, oh yeah, it's just a whole church of sinners and we're all this whatever, but no one knows what's going on with each other as far as sin. And it's not like we should be airing it out with each other and everyone should know what everyone else is doing, but it's one thing to say we all are, but then if no one talks about it and it's kept hush hush, almost like under the table, like hide it under the bed, no one gets to know, it's a secret, then people who are also from the outside looking in just see a clean room. And you're saying, well, we're a bunch of messy people in this house. And then you walk into the house and it's all clean and you're like, okay, but you say you're messy, but I don't see the mess. And it's not that I want to see the mess because I'm glad you're cleaning it, but if you say you're messy, like, what was the mess like? You know what I mean? Like, share with me what that experience was like, though, so I can understand how you got from messy to clean, not just seeing the clean all the time. And that's where I guess I feel sometimes like I'm the messy person walking into the clean room, and I'm exploring that part. But yeah, it's also hard. No one wants to talk about their dirty laundry, right? So, yeah, it's kind of like my proposition to you, or if there's anything that you can speak to that's more broad, but.
And again, like I said, we just kind of met.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
I know.
not going to pass any judgment or anything, or I'm not going to say anything. But one of the things that someone told me was, if we all brought all our sins to the table,
yeah, of course,
we'd take our bag and we'd walk home, or like our faults or our worries or any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be like, wow, I can deal with mine. I'll pick mine up and I'll take it with me. Because if you look to see what was out there, then you'd be like, wow, okay,
mm-hmm.
I'll sort this out.
I'll deal with myself.
I'll deal with myself, and hopefully I'll pray for those people too, right? And that's kind of how I look at it. I'm like, no one's outwardly saying anything to me. So another way to look at it was when you're on the road, right? And someone does something that's really questionable, harebrained scheme, whatever, and there's all over the place. One of the things that kind of calmed me down was I don't know what that person's going through today. I don't need to know, but maybe they're having one of those days where something really bad's happening and they just need that, and I'll let it go. So when I go to church, I'm like, I don't see everyone going there with a clean slate. I know everyone has something that they're dealing with. And if I can accept that, then I'm hoping they're accepting me for being here too. I don't need to know what they're going through, and I don't need to know how they get past it, because I know we all have something.
Yeah.
So if I can acknowledge that they do it and I can respect them for being here still, hopefully they're using that same lens to look at me so that I don't feel judged. And that's the thing, like, I don't feel judged when I go to church. You know, I just know that everyone has something on the go. Everyone's at a different point in their spiritual life that they're dealing with stuff. So I know we all come there with an open slate, and the ones who tell you they're not, you know what the deal is with that. Okay, you're not dealing with anything.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's why, I don't feel those kind of pressures,
Mm-hmm.
because we all bring something there. And anyone who denies it is probably just not telling you the truth, right? So,
Interesting. So yeah, essentially, you understand the fact that everyone's dealing with something, and
Yeah.
so that's enough for you to not have to.
Yeah, I didn't need confirmation. I just know that everyone has something. Everyone had something. And I think when you find a network of people that you can be honest about with those things, it helps. It helps. But I don't think, I've, walked into the church and said, I need to be the only one. I need to know that I'm not the only one that's going through something, because I know we all are. And I just think some people hide it better than others. And I think that's fair. But I think we all go there because we can bring something to, we're bringing something to the altar, and we're strengthening our community in that regard. We're filling that church. We're showing that we're all open to, being better Catholics and Christians and stuff like that. Yeah, I think those times where I did feel pressure around church, I think that was just me, but I think for the most part, I think everyone's dealing with something. So, I don't need to see everyone's sins, because we all have them, and they can keep theirs, and I will keep mine. And we'll pray for each other that we all move beyond them, I guess.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I don't have anything more to add, but I like how, John, you said basically you're using a very charitable / generous perspective on things. And I do agree that, because even when you go to work or when you meet someone on the street, like if everyone just bore themselves to you at any given moment, that's also an unrealistic world. Nothing would get done. So maybe the question back to you, Miguel, is does that response suffice, or are you looking for a better balance of, like, some level of acknowledgement, like open acknowledgement, a sincere open acknowledgement, not like a false humility, versus, okay, you are working on your stuff, or you're just ambivalent of your own flaws or your own struggles as like a distraction almost.
I think there's definitely I'm taking, like, how do I say it? I appreciate the intent behind the approach. Actually, I think there's a lot of merit to that approach. On a personal level, it's basically, if every person could adopt that mindset, then ideally the like it's like basically it's good. Like it would lead to a very good or community. Like for example, if I adopted that, it would not, I wouldn't have to, like, there would be no worry about like what's happening around me. It's more so like I just acknowledge already the state of everything around me, and I am now focused just on myself, which is a good thing, right? Because it's the whole look inward, not outward, right? I think part of where though my outlook comes from is why I'm kind of searching for this balance or trying to figure out if we should, because it's not that I think we all should. And I did state, like, it's not about all of us airing our dirty laundry either. I'm not trying to get everyone to do that. I'm just saying, speaking to it a bit more, or making it more knowledgeable, the fact that, yeah, no, I have laundry that is dirty, and like part of it is like this, like a vague idea is like, whatever. But the reason I'm kind of talk about that is because I think of people who are not in any way connected to Christianity or faith in general. And that outside perspective is people in faith are just judgy, or
Oh yeah,
they
yeah, that's what
right?
you're saying. Yeah,
That, and so to me, I'm like, if you only knew that no one is going to judge because of this mindset, right? But then when I think about where is that perspective coming from, that judgy notion, it's because there are definitely some people, and they'll, those experiences will speak louder than any other experiences where they did come across judgy, because, you kind of made the joke earlier about like the people who say like, no, I figured it all out. I'm good now. I got it. Like, we're all set. It's like, really? Dang. But then they've hit that point too where they start, then some of them will come across as like, I figured it out. Now I'm kind of like judging a little bit. And that's where that experience, I'm like, well, that's rubbing people the wrong way. And if those people knew that we were more actually like them and also dealing with the same crap, then they would be more comfortable coming into the church feeling that same way, and then not feel like, well, you know what, I'll figure out my stuff first and then I'll come to church. Because that's sometimes the outlook that I think people get, is like, well, I'm not good enough to be in church, so I'm gonna step away. Versus like, no, come to church because, hey, look, I got the same stuff going on in my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
bro, invite him
Yeah.
to confession.
yeah,
Those lines are full, right? Like,
fair.
if they're
Not
like,
to mass, literally. No, 7:00 at this time.
you know what?
Watch the line.
I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, invite them to mass, and they'll see that we're all the same.
Mhm.
But if you want them to see it, invite them to confession.
Yeah.
Because it's not just confession; it's the absolution after,
Yeah.
right? Like, the thing is, like, with confession comes action, right? You can't. At least I believe is like, you can't just keep going to confession and not work on the action part of it
Mhm.
all. But yeah, like, people who want to say, oh, you guys are all judgy and stuff like that. I'm like, well, why do we have confession? Because we all acknowledge that we have sins. And, it's one of those things that, I should practice way more often.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things, right? Like, if someone's going to judge us and be like, you know what, oh, you guys think you're better than everyone, then why would I need to confess my sins? Why do I feel a weight upon
Your shoulder, yeah,
some
your
of the
heart,
decisions and the tense and anxiety? There's a reason why it's there. Because it's afforded to us, because we know we're not perfect, right? Like, and that whole thing about like, people sorting it out before they come to church.
Mhm.
And come to church.
Yeah.
It'll help you sort it out. Sometimes that quiet is what you need, right? Just, I think that's one of the things that we're very challenged to have nowadays, is just quiet and stillness.
Yeah.
With these little pocket computers and stuff like that, there's so much interaction. There's so much stimulus. Sometimes, withdrawing yourself and just presenting yourself there to be present and be a participant, or just sit there in the quiet stillness of it, is something very, very rewarding, I guess. But yeah, man, invite him to confession.
No, actually, that's good advice. Honestly, 'cause the
Yeah,
lines
like,
are pretty long.
it,
Yeah.
you know how many times they make the special call to confession, and you get there and it's like, wow, it's gonna be a while.
Mhm. Yeah.
But when you're standing in that line, is the end worth the effort? Absolutely right. So, just something else to think about, I guess, something that goes through my mind. I think it's very easy to look past those things when inside I acknowledge that I'm a sinner, right?
Mhm.
And people are like, oh, people believe you guys are better than everyone. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I have my compass, and it's pointed in one direction, and it aims, and it helps me.
Yeah.
It helps me make, hopefully better decisions. So,
No, yeah, that's a fair point. And I think, yeah, that's the well, actually, I had another thought where I was thinking, man, you said something and I was trying to relate it back to what Merwin's question was about. So something that I've been thinking about recently has been about the action of letting go and not putting so much weight on basically entrusting God, what that truly means, and as far as like not feeling the burden on my own shoulders to figure it all out, make it all better, but allowing time, life, and like my slow, minimal efforts to see progress on a longer scale, I guess, instead of short term like snap fingers and things are
Bro,
better.
it's still effort, man.
Yeah.
You said littlest effort,
Mm.
but it's still effort.
Mm.
And that's the important part, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sometimes you gotta take the leap of faith. And I remember speaking to this in one of our groups. I'm like, before you go into like a fire,
Mm-hmm.
there's always that thing called the threshold, right?
Okay.
The threshold is that separation between the outside and the inside. Sometimes you just got to make that thing. You got to make that cross. You got to step over the threshold because you've prepared for it. You believe what you're doing is right.
Mm-hmm.
And you believe in the things that brought you to this place. Just step over, make the crossover. It's not a, you can always jump back, but,
Yeah.
if you don't step forward, what are you going to miss? Right. So that's kind of where the entrusting part is. The other entrusting part is practicing the faith, right? Like going to church and stuff like that, because that's how you learn. That's how you learn to trust more. This is where you get the knowledge to base your decisions on. So that's kind of what made it, back in the day, I think my wife said to me, she's like, man, you used to fall asleep in church all the time. I'm like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, I know. I remember that. But when you sit there and you actually engage and you start to listen, then you start learning more. And it's very hard to separate yourself from that. And that's become the learning part.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you can take something you've learned and try to apply it in action, that's when it actually sets in, right? Like I talk about this at work when I'm teaching new guys or I'm teaching at work, exposure and training. I can expose you to a skill, but you need to train so it's learned. If I just go to church and I expose myself to church and I don't go out and practice it, then I'm not learning it. And that's where the trust part came in, actually listening. And, it's pretty cool if you actually
Mm-hmm.
listen to, the gospel and you listen to that stuff. You're like, okay, yeah, you can break these down into layman's terms and be like, wow, that's a general message that we should all kind of get behind. If you took all sorts of terms out of it, like religious terms out of it, you'd be like, wow, that's a story, man. We could learn from this. And then you interject the faith part, and so you're like, okay, that's where it came from. And that's where the trust comes from, right? Trust comes from learning and knowing that you have that safety net, I guess, of sorts. So
Does that kind of connect to your initial question in your column? Because also I was thinking about the entrusting piece, and because I think, yeah, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what I thought your concern was, what it was about your need for the control of like, how do I know that this is the right or what I'm doing
Yeah.
it versus like just like I entrust
ask yourself, will you ever know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So
What they say, experience is the lesson you needed 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
Right? Like
You got to experience it
sometimes.
to know.
So like as it's funny because Miguel and I both get to like almost be like a spectator and then jump in, John. Like I really appreciate everything that you've sort of helped us unravel so far. And even though this conversation has been pretty like maybe to some degree at the surface level where you're saying things without necessarily like going into very specific detail, I'm going through a very like emotional roller coaster on the inside where I'm trying to keep everything in check because right, because certain things that you're saying I'm like, oh yeah, that's a learning point. And in the past, like when we've recorded, I've always brought it back to like the talking points or the whatever. It's like, oh, but almost like a debatey logical sort of response to it, where right now I'll just choose to like recuse myself from like going further down this path because I am still processing it on the inside, and hopefully like for whoever is listening to this at whatever point, or even me listening to this like years later, hopefully that version of me has like learned the lessons that are being discussed here. Because I do think it takes, it's almost like, it's like if you're teaching me a lesson, it's like, oh, this is how I did it. Now do it. I'm like, dude, I need to put in some reps before I could just jump in and show you that I've done it, right? So, but also acknowledging at the same time that there is something happening beneath the surface, which just takes time to sort of like mature.
Absolutely. And like some of the questions you were asking, it's like, you know what? I can definitely see myself back when I was in my 20s, in my mid to late teens, where I thought certain things. But there's something with getting older that kind of changes your perspective and you can go different routes. So, you know, maybe it's just the privilege of having experiences in the past that have led me to this point where I'm comfortable talking about where it's brought me versus where I've been. And, you know, like I said, we've all I don't think it's at that point where I've questioned my faith. I've questioned the outcomes. Like I've always had a strong faith. At times I was like, what's with the outcome? What is happening?
Mhm.
Why is this happening? But I didn't question God and I didn't question the purpose. I just questioned like why?
Mm.
Why is this happening? What was the meaning behind this? And that's that thing about developing that toolbox. Which is the tool that I'm supposed to pull out to learn this lesson? And it's all right there. It's like a stacked toolbox. You just got to you just got to figure out which tool it is for the lesson you're going to learn. Right. So, you know, like there's a lot of questions that you're asking me. And I'm like, okay, yeah. When I was earlier, you know, in probably high school, early 20s kind of thing, that I'd probably maybe think about those things. Right. And it wouldn't be or people judging me, but more so like the judgment part of going to church, like, well, you know, why are you doing that? You know, this is church kind of thing. Um, and then, you know, you gain or you're blessed with experience. You're blessed with getting older. And you go there and you're like, man, instead of thinking about why are these people doing X, Y, or Z at the church, ask yourself, aren't you just happy they're here and these pews are full and there's one more opportunity that they can hear the word and maybe be moved by it, right? So those were some of the things that helped me kind of get past, you know, things where I may have judged people and stuff like that. It was just like, look, everyone comes here at a different point of their life. And, you know, the beauty of it is that hopefully I can teach my kids that too, instead of getting upset when people are doing things or, you know, not participating the way they should, just to remind them, like, hey, we all have the opportunity to be here. And it allows us the opportunity to see the blessing in disguise, I guess. But yeah, like, you know, yeah, I
Mhm.
remember, I think, you know, back in my early teens and 20s, I was probably, you know, standing there going, what, you know, decorum, this kind of thing, you know, a little bit of decorum, a little bit of discipline, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's like, now they're here. You know, even if you're forced to be here, you're here. Like, you know, as a kid, if a kid's running around making noise or whatever, I can't get upset because I'm looking at their parents. I'm like, thank you for having the courage to bring them here, knowing they'd act out, knowing that it'd be challenging instead of being judgy. Like, man,
Yeah,
we're
like
trying to all participate.
why are you bringing a kid
Right.
here?
So, you know, that person
Mm-hmm.
you might have been talking or feeling that pressure from may have been someone like me back then. I was an outward and I didn't like do things
You
and
didn't go up to them and be
I
like,
go up to them
what's it?
like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm pretty sure I've seen that happen before. Like people giving parents dirty
Yeah.
looks. I'm like,
Yeah.
look, I'm like, no, I'm like, they're here. They're here. They had the courage to bring their
Mm-hmm.
kids here, knowing it's gonna be challenging. And I'm like, wow, that takes a lot more courage than me just trying to focus harder and listen better. But, you know, that's the beauty of experience. You can grow from it. I'm not free of judgment and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
free of sin, but I have a little bit of experience where I could be like, yeah, you know what? I might have been that guy, but now I try not to be that guy because, you know,
Yeah.
if I get that ability to have grace, then should be able to afford it to someone else.
So I want to use that point to sort of segue into, because honestly, John, there's still like, out of all the stuff that we talked about so far, my list of questions for you is sort of like getting longer. Sort of, because
Shouldn't have said so
but
much.
but
It's all
I
good.
I
It's gonna
want
get
to
worse.
focus on one of the several things I want to sort of hear your take on, because out of like all of my merits and flaws and whatever, the one thing that the only thing perhaps I consistently hold true to is authenticity. Like a genuine, just be yourself, like warts and all. And like, it's not that, again, I disclose everything to everyone, but just wear it like on your face, right? I'm not sort of going to shy away from it. And one of the things that you sort of mentioned, and even our very first conversation, is what is part of what attracted me to you, is, oh, if you only saw me at work, or the guy I am at work
Absolutely.
is very different. And I like people who sort of struggle with the virtues of authenticity and like trying to stay away from hypocrisy. So how have you dealt with that? Like, and like, you can give examples or not. I'm not sort of looking for specifics, but how do you sort of hold that dichotomy and like make it one authentic person?
I'm still working on it. Still working on it. And having more engaging more in the faith has helped. So just to, to kind of put things in context, you know, there's many ways I could be like, well, yeah, if you saw me at, at work and how my temperament or my attitude is different than when I'm outside of work, there's something to be said. It's like, you know, I should be looking and acting more empathetic, more, you know, like it's a blessing to be here in the sense that, like if you have to deal with, you deal with certain people, you're like, man, seriously, like, you deal with the struggles of why is someone who's impaired getting in an accident and like, surviving or whatever. Like this is something that's gone on. People have talked
Mm,
about this before, right? Like, why does the drunk driver live and the innocent people, like those things, right? And it brings things out in you. Like, you know, maybe I could be, there's another way to look at this. Or you see, you know, the same people, you know, using resources and
yeah.
you're like, what
You're
are you doing?
wasting. Yeah.
What are you doing? Like, whatever, instead of being like, hey, you're probably in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you find your help. And if part of that help is something I could do, maybe I should look at it more like that instead of just being like, serious, man, you're doing this. Why are you doing that kind of thing? Right. Instead of that, be like, yo, can I help you
Yeah.
somehow? Instead of just being so quick to discredit and so quick to just see things that are challenging in uh in the things that I have to deal with. Because to be honest with you, like the fire part and doing that stuff, it's like you do it because it's action, 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 action. It's the interpersonal stuff that, I found that, going to the men's fraternity and stuff has kind of helped me with. Instead of just looking at it like, are you serious? This is the X time we've had to deal with this. Just look at it like this. Well, look, it's a blessing to be here. There's a reason we're here, you know, and it's your job. So you might as well just act with a little bit more,
Charity.
kindness,
Kindness.
a little bit more empathy, any of those things, instead of just being like, are you serious? And just getting mad and frustrated. So the things like, like I said, the things we talk about in men's fraternity, like learning to be more charitable, learning to be more empathetic to the way people's lives are going and stuff like that. I listen to that, and there's been times where I've sat there and be like, that's a struggle
Yeah.
because if you see X numerous times and you're like, oh, it just makes me mad. But then you hear, you know, scripture about, being charitable, being, you know, taking care of your fellow man. I'm like, it's one of those things. It hits you and you're like, I should be able to bring those two parts of my life together. And it doesn't need to be that it's going to change me as a firefighter, but it's going to change me as a person.
Yeah.
And hopefully, like, instead of just being, dismissive, angry, being whatever with the things that I have, you know, or the people that I've encountered, there's a different take that's probably healthier for me and better for, my spiritual being, I guess, and living within the faith. So yeah, when you asked that, I was just like, yeah, when we talked about it and you kind of looked at me and you gave me the second guess look about, what do you mean by that? If I only saw you at work, I wasn't sure if you were going to be like, oh my gosh, he's like evil or something like that or whatever. But it was more of like, yeah, you know what? There's parts that I need to bring closer together versus separate. You can't serve two masters. Hopefully I can bring both those parts of my life closer together. Right. And yeah, I think that's the goal because, man, if I can balance that, then probably put more years on my heart, probably have less gray hairs, probably have less anxieties and stuff like that. But, it's a challenge, but it's growth. But yeah, sometimes you decompress and you're at work and you guys, guys, guys will just, be hard on each other and we'll just like, we'll just, some days we'll just like, we'll just be guys and we'll roughhouse or whatever. And it's just like, okay, wait, take a breath. How can you decompress healthier? Right? How can you see the silver lining here somewhere instead of just being angry?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so that's what I meant, right? Like if you saw me at work and, just be like, wow, is this the same dude that we sit around with and we talk about faith with? And that's always been a struggle. It's been a struggle because, you can't, one life should navigate one path should navigate your life, right? And to, kind of separate the two does disservice to all. If I can bring them closer together, then hopefully that allows me to serve better instead of just being angry and,
No, yeah, I hear you. I was just thinking the whole time about like, yeah, it's so easy to become jaded, especially in your line of work, but even in just basically any interpersonal interaction, right? Whether it's customer service or, yeah, just kind of client work. You're just when you deal with people that you see them at their worst sometimes, right? Or they're arguing with you or doing something that now you have to help them out of, and the whole time you're just thinking like, but why'd you do that? Like,
Yeah.
right? And then, or yeah, in the case of like if the drunk driver lives,
you're like, what the,
yeah,
how
life is not fair, kind of
like,
thing.
how does that happen? Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just ask yourself these things and, sometimes anger comes out.
Yeah.
And those are things that need to get moderated. That's why I said, like if you saw me there, you'd be like, dude, you're angry at times, right? Some things aren't balanced. And it's just like, there has to be a silver lining and examining the faith has kind of helped that to bring the two worlds closer together. And if not understanding why they happen,
Mm-hmm.
which may never come,
Yeah.
but dealing with the outcomes has helped more because I look at it from a different lens. But yeah, getting angry about stuff that you can't fix and being disheartened to certain things that you should actually open your heart to are different things. So, that's what I meant, by being a bit of a hypocrite, right? Like, doing the Christian thing at times is tough, but there shouldn't, like, I could take the word Christian thing out, but doing the right thing when being inundated with
Yeah.
many things is kind of tough. But there's got to be a way to bring them closer together, and that's the goal right now. It's just trying to figure out how to, you know, find how those things meld together. So
Yeah, so I guess on my take on this, it's like, yeah, I want to like make them like cohesive in one, but that's when the nihilism kicks in, where it's like it's easier to make it one on the negative side than sort of like be optimistic and like, believe in the better or better halves or whatever you want to call it. So that's also like, because yeah, to me, the prime goal is to make it one. But the danger is that it's easier to make it one on the negative side, where it's just like, okay, this is who I am now. I'm the bad man.
yeah, but something about something about picking a fight. Don't pick easy fights. Pick the hard fights. They make you grow, right?
It's easier to be jaded and to just hate the world or be
And
mean
that's
to
one thing
people.
I've
Yeah.
heard, man.
Yeah.
It's I don't even know how to phrase this because I tell my kids all the time, don't pick the easy fight. Pick the one that's going to help you learn something. But yeah, people may misconstrue what I say right now. But it's like going to fight a fire after training and preparedness is the easy part. Dealing with people is the harder part. How to be.
Well, just being charitable to someone is the harder part. When if someone punches you in the face, it's harder to just sit back and then forgive them than it is to punch them back.
Yeah, but I think there's also a balance there. I don't think
Okay,
you let people just punch you in the face.
So as you said that, I almost had this thought of like John goes in to like fight fires, but his purpose is not to fight the fire; it's to save the people. And like you see, like maybe that's why the fire part is easier than the people part,
Because the objective is straightforward. I go in and I search, or I go in and I put the fire out,
yeah,
or I go in and I ventilate. It's pretty straightforward.
Fire is also always the bad thing. There's never a point where you're like, well, no, the fire's serving a purpose. I want to keep it.
Yeah,
Like,
you're like, but you're right. Like, you look at it and, it's clear cut. Objective, outcome. When you deal with people, it's like the outcome's going to be the same, but can I approach the objective differently? And that's where the growth is. This, and I'm glad we're talking about this because it's helping me. And it's like, okay, how do I get to that outcome? Because we know we're going to get the same outcome. You're going to go X direction, whether it be, seeking further help or whatever, and I'm going to go back to the truck and go to run another call. But can that interaction between the outcome be better? Can I find a way to make that more, more, I guess, a better experience for both of us, right? Instead of just being angry to the fact of certain things reoccurring. But yeah.
Yeah, because the other layer I saw in you is like this. In order to be like a firefighter or a cop or a soldier or a doctor, there's a part of you that genuinely wants to serve people. Right? Otherwise you wouldn't end up, obviously the con side of looking at it is if you just want power or like if you like to see the world burn, that's again the negative take on it, but there's something implicit and inherent in these roles where you want to serve people. And it's really interesting because the quote unquote easy part of like taking care of the fire isn't actually your main purpose. Right? We call you a firefighter, but really what you're trying to do is save people. And sometimes the saving people needs a very different skill set than fighting the fire.
Yeah, and as the job expands, so do our responsibilities, and helping people kind of broadens. It used to be we help people at fires and car accidents and machinery events, anything like that, and medical calls. Now it's branching out to broadening the scope of practice, I guess you'd say. And yeah, it's sometimes you have to call upon other skills in order to be able to help serve those people. But like we talk about it, and you just said just like there's an inherent need to serve or something like that in that regard that why those jobs take I don't know why they call to certain people. But at the end of the day, it's like I couldn't be a doctor. The pressures they go through, the stuff they do. I couldn't be, you know, uh, I couldn't be someone who, like a scientist, an
Mm-hmm.
engineer. I couldn't do any of those other jobs. I couldn't be a pastor. I couldn't do any of those things because each of those people are called to serve in their own way. This is just how I was called to serve with, you know, the experiences and the upbringing I had. It just seemed like it was the right fit for the person I was and the person I was raised to be. So, helping people is just another way of helping, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I have a bad day and my furnace went for a crap,
Mm-hmm.
the HVAC guy came over and he helped me that day and he changed my outcome of my day. Everyone's there in some way to serve. It's just I just picked this one. I just picked this one.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think your job though directly translates to what at least I believe is the end goal or result of faith is to really truly practice your faith is to be a servant to others. And that's why I'm saying it's so directly transferable is because in your practice of, fighting fires and helping people, you are being asked to even approach them not as an arbiter or a judge of their actions, but as literally a servant to their actions without judgment, or to at least as less judgment as possible.
so but it's really I'm kind of glad you brought that up because
Yeah.
of what I just said about being the hypocrite, right?
Yeah.
And like approaching things like that. And like at the end of the day, I work with dozens of amazing firefighters. And yes, at times, we may be judgy when we roll up on scene, but it doesn't hinder, the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Our job is still to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, right? Like just going to church. My job is to go to church and learn. I may be judgy all the way through there till I get there. But when I get there, that's the part.
Yeah.
And when I leave, hopefully I'm enriched better so I don't repeat the same mistakes when I come back. But yeah, like it is to serve,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess everyone serves in their own way. I just found a way that I was happy to do it and something that gave me a challenge and made it work for my lifestyle. But at the end of the day, right? Like, like we just said, I could be judgy when I get there, but it doesn't stop me from serving, right? I've never seen a firefighter say, I've judged this person and I'm not going to serve them.
As far as their fault, they can put it out.
Yeah. Or
Just
they
drive
cause
off.
this,
Yeah.
we're just not going to deal with this.
Got you. Yeah.
And that's the beauty of, honestly, that's one of the greatest things that I take from the people I work with is that no matter how how judgy or how we can be and how the things we can say to each other and things we can say and do, at the end of the day, it doesn't stop them from serving. It does not stop them from putting,
Their lives on the line.
well, just
and-
putting their
yeah.
feet in front of the other
Yeah.
and walking into whether it be whatever call they need, someone's flooded basement, someone's whatever. It doesn't stop them from doing it. And that's what I hope. That's what I hope, people will see,
Mhm.
About our faith. It shouldn't matter, if you can look past all that and know that when we come here, we're all people of faith at the end of the day. I don't care how you got here. We're here now.
Yeah.
So
Like the last note I wanted to kind of point at was I really liked your perspective on just you made a note about basically understanding that you have so much faith in God and the impact that he can have on a person's life that you're not concerned with the current present state of each individual and if they're judging others or like you were talking about the parent or the dirty looks that parents might get if they bring their loud kid, because you're understanding that if they're really there for faith in God, God's gonna work. And you're more concerned with the end result and understanding the end result's always going to be better and they're going to get there. It's just a matter of time. Instead of being like presently, well, no, you're being judgmental and that's bothering me. It's like, no, hopefully they'll get there and you trust God in that. And I think that's a really huge piece for me that I'm trying to learn as well. And I'm been exploring more. So I really appreciate the conversation today because it really is about like that undying faith, that real deep faith and like just knowing, no, God's got it. And I don't need to have my hands on the steering wheel and help guide it. It's like, God's got it. Like, it's good.
God's cleared the path. I just got to steer the wheel straight.
Oh, okay. Opposite. God's got it. You got to steer the wheel, but God's cleared the path.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
You know what? Like, here's the other part too, is that I've been blessed with so many opportunities personally, professionally, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it like that opportunity. If we close the door to our faith and we still tell people they can't come here, they can't do that, as long as they come respectfully and with an open heart. That's my big thing. Come respectfully of our faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I say our because if you're going to come into the church, you're accepting our faith. Come respectfully and with an open heart and see what it has to offer you. You know, if we don't give them that opportunity, how many people are we turning away that could change or that could be the next ambassador for the
Mm-hmm.
mass? That could be the next person that says, you know what? Having a life as clergy is something I look forward to, or just someone who says, you know what? Being a part of the men's fraternity is something I want to embark on because it helps strong men helps men get together to be stronger in their faith. Or people who reach out to the youth. Like, I get it, man. I have teenagers. It's challenging. But when you step up to the plate to do it, you're acknowledging that, hey, this is going to be hard and this is going to be challenging, but this is my spot and this is, you know, how I'm going to serve.
Yeah.
I just think that we can't close opportunities for people to be better. And this is where part of the hypocrite part is. It's the forgiveness part. It's one of the toughest things to do. But when you forgive or you let go, you release that weight and you're not chained to it anymore. And that's on you. It's not on whatever you're forgiving or letting go. But if we close the opportunity for people to do those things, the opportunity for people to learn about our faith, then how are we being ambassadors and how are we, you know, sharing it?
No, I agree. And on that note, I would like to close this episode because I think that was a really great spot to stop.
Thanks for having me, guys.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom and
No wisdom
approach.
here. Just a guy.
The approach is good though. Then, if not wisdom, just the approach. It's what is it? What is it called? It's applicable.